Louisville is still cheaper than a lot of major cities people are moving from, but cheaper does not always mean cheap. And if you're thinking about moving to Louisville in 2026, one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is looking at only at the home price or the rent and not thinking through the full monthly cost of actually living here. Because your real cost of living is not just your mortgage or your rent. It is your housing, payment, taxes, your insurance, utilities, groceries, lifestyle, and all the little costs that sneak up once you actually live here. So in this video, I'm going to break down what it really costs to live in Louisville, Kentucky in 2026. We'll talk about home prices, rent, mortgage payments, property taxes, utilities, groceries, transportation, and some of the hidden costs that a lot of people forget to budget before they move here. And by the end, I'll give you a more realistic way to think about whether Louisville actually fits your budget, whether you're relocating from out of state, buying your first home, or trying to decide whether renting or buying makes more sense. And if you're watching this because you're thinking about moving to Louisville or Southern Indiana, my contact information is below. I help people every week compare neighborhoods, understand realistic monthly payments, and figure out what actually makes sense for their budget before they make the move. One of the first things people hear about Louisville is that it is affordable, and compared to a lot of larger cities, that is true. If you're coming from places like Nashville, Austin, Denver, Chicago, parts of Florida, the West Coast, or the Northeast, Louisville can feel much more manageable. You may find that your money goes further here. You may be able to get more house for the price. You may have a lower monthly payment than what you were looking at in your current city, but there's the part that gets missed. Louisville is not one single cost of living experience. Two people can move here in the exact same income and have completely different financial realities, depending on where they live, whether they rent or buy, how much debt they have, whether they have kids, how far they commute, and what kind of lifestyle they expect. A single person renting a one-bedroom apartment is going to experience Louisville very differently than a family buying a four-bedroom home in a specific school district. A first-time buyer trying to stay under a certain monthly payment is going to experience the market differently than someone relocating from a higher-cost state with a significant equity from a previous home. So whenever someone asks me, is Louisville affordable? My answer is, it can be. But the better question is, affordable for what lifestyle, in what area, at what monthly payment? That's the question we're really going to answer in this video. Let's start with the biggest expense for most people, which is housing. In Louisville, the average home price is still significantly lower than many major metro areas, which is one of the big reasons people continue to consider moving here. But the monthly payment matters more than the price. That is especially true in 2026 because interest rates have changed what affordability feels like. A few years ago, a buyer could look at a home price and feel pretty comfortable with the payment. Today, that same price can feel very different because mortgage rates are higher than when they were during the ultra low years. So let's use an example. Let's say you're looking at a home around $265,000. That number is not unusual in Louisville, depending on the area, condition, and type of property. Now, if you put 5% down, your loan amount is going to be somewhere around $251,000 before we factor in closing costs or other details. A mortgage rate in the mid-6s, your principal and interest payment could land somewhere in the mid-1500s. But that is not your total payment. You still have to add property taxes, you still have to add homeowners insurance. If you put in less than 20% down, you may have mortgage insurance as well. Depending on the property, you may also have a HOA fee. And you also need to think about maintenance because owning a home comes with maintenance. So that $265,000 home could feel very realistically like an all-in housing cost somewhere around $1,900 to $2,200 per month, depending on the exact loan, taxes, insurance, down payment, and property. And I want to be very clear, this is not a quote, it's not a promise, this is just a planning example for you. Your actual payment will depend on your loan program, your credit, your down payment, your interest rate, the taxes on that specific home, insurance, and whether there are any HOA fees. But the reason I'm walking through it this way is because this is where a lot of buyers get surprised. They search online and think, okay, homes are in the mid 200s, that sounds affordable. But when they see the full monthly payment, they realize the real number is not just the mortgage, it's the full payment. And that full payment needs to fit into your actual life, not just your pre-approval letter, not just what the lender says you technically qualify for. It's going to be your real life, your groceries, your car payment, your student loans, your childcare, your savings goals, any travel that you have upcoming, your emergency fund. This is what determines whether a home is actually affordable. Another thing to understand is that Louisville is not one price point. Your budget can stretch very differently depending on where you are looking. There are areas where buyers may find more affordable options, especially if they are flexible in size, updates, commute, or age of the home. There are also areas where prices can climb quickly because of location, school, walkability, lot size, newer construction, or demand. For example, buying in parts of Louisville like Fern Creek, Okolona, PRP, Valley Station, or certain areas around the south end may feel very different from looking in places like St. Matthews, the Highlands, Crescent Hill, Norton Commons, or even parts of Oldham County. And then you have Southern Indiana, which is a major part of the conversation for many people moving to this area. Places like New Albany, Jeffersonville, Clarksville, Sellersburg, Georgetown can offer a different mix of home prices, taxes, commute patterns, and lifestyle. So the question is not just, can I afford Louisville? The question should be more, which version of Louisville can I afford comfortably? Because if your goal is to stay under a certain monthly payment, your neighborhood strategy matters. Sometimes that means looking at a slightly different area. Sometimes it means buying a smaller home in a location you really like. Sometimes it means choosing a home that needs cosmetic updates but has strong bones. Sometimes it could even mean renting first so you can learn the area before making a major purchase. This is one of the reasons I always tell relocation buyers, don't just search by price. Search by monthly payment, the commute you're going to take, lifestyle you want, and long-term fit. Because the cheapest house is not always the smartest move. And the most expensive house you qualify for is not always the best move either. Now let's talk about rent. If you move into Louisville and you're not ready to buy yet, renting can be a smart temporary strategy. It gives you time to learn the neighborhoods, understand your commute, figure out where you actually spend your time, and decide what part of the city feels right for you. Generally speaking, Louisville rent is still more reasonable than many larger cities, but rents have gone up over the last several years, and the experience can vary a lot depending on where you live and what type of property you want. A basic apartment in a more affordable part of town is very different from a newer apartment in a highly desirable area with amenities, parking, walkability, and quick access to restaurants or entertainment. As a general planning range, many one-bedroom apartments in Louisville are going to be around the low 1,000s, give or take, depending on location and quality. Two bedrooms often move into the 1,200 to 1,500 range or higher, especially in newer buildings or more in-demand areas. Single-family rentals can be in higher, especially if you need multiple bedrooms, yard, a garage, or a specific school area. The biggest thing I want you to understand is this: renting is not always throwing money away if it helps you avoid buying in the wrong location. For relocation buyers, that can be very important. If you've never lived here, you may think you want one part of town because what you saw online, but then once you get here, you realize your commute is different than you expected, or the school situation matters more than you thought it would, or you actually spend more time in another part of town, or you want to be closer to family that's here, work, restaurants, parks, or even the airport if you travel. So if you move in here and you feel unsure, renting for 6 to 12 months can be a smart move. But if you already understand the area, you have a long-term timeline and the numbers work, then buying may make more sense for you. The key is not rent versus buy in general. The key is rent versus buy for your situation. Now let's talk about one of the most overlooked parts of affordability: property taxes, insurance, and escrow. A lot of buyers focus on the purchase price, but your monthly payment includes more than principal and interest. Property taxes matter. Insurance matters. Mortgage insurance may matter depending on your down payment. HOA fees may matter, and those costs can change over time. In Jefferson County and the surrounding counties, property taxes can vary based on location, taxing district, assessed value, and local services. So two homes with similar price can have different monthly payments because the tax situation may not be identical. Insurance is another important piece. Homeowners insurance is property specific. The age of the roof can matter. The age and condition of the home can matter. The claims history can make a difference. The location can make a difference. And insurance costs have been a bigger conversation nationally, so this is something buyers need to pay attention to. Here is the part I really want buyers to hear. Even if you have a fixed rate mortgage, your monthly payment can still change. Why? Because your taxes and insurance can change over time. If your property taxes go up, your escrow payment can go up. If your homeowner's insurance premium increases, your escrow payment can go up. So when I'm helping someone think through affordability, I don't just want to know the purchase price, I want to know what is the estimated tax bill. What does insurance look like? Is there a HOA? Is there mortgage insurance? How old is the roof on the house you're getting? How old are the mechanicals? Are there going to be unexpected expenses coming up? What future maintenance? Because these things affect the real cost of owning a home. And that is the difference between just buying a house and buying a house wisely. Now let's talk about utilities. Louisville utilities are generally manageable compared to many parts of the country, but your actual utility bills can vary a lot depending on the home. A smaller apartment is obviously going to be very different from a large single family home. A newer energy efficient home is going to be different from an older home with original windows, poor insulation, and an aging HVAC system. And Louisville has a lot of older housing stock. That is part of the charm of the city, but it's also part of the cost. You can find beautiful homes in neighborhoods like the Highlands, Crescent Hill, Clifton, Germantown, Old Louisville, and other historic or established areas, but older homes can come with older systems. So when you're buying, don't just ask, can I afford the purchase price? You then need to ask, how expensive is this home going to be to operate in the long term? That means you'll be needing to look at the HVAC system, the windows, the installation, the water heater, the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, the size of the home, and how well it's being maintained. A home can look affordable online, but cost more to heat, cool, maintain, and update. That does not mean that older homes are bad, not at all. There's some beautiful older homes out there. Some are well built and full of character, but you need to know what you're buying, because the true cost of home ownership is not just the day you close. It's the cost of living in that home month after month, year after year. Now let's get into everyday costs. Groceries in Louisville are generally pretty reasonable and often close to the national average. You have the major grocery options like Kroger, Meijer, Walmart, Costco, Sam's Club, Aldi, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, and local markets depending on where you live. We even have Publix now. Your grocery spending is going to depend more on household size and shopping habits than the city itself. A single person who cooks at home most nights is going to have a very different monthly grocery bill than a family of 4 kids with sports, packed lunches, and regular takeout. Gas and transportation are also important. Louisville is a driving city for most people. There are walkable pockets, and some people can reduce how much they drive depending on where they live and where they work. But for most residents, you should assume you'll need a car. And that means your cost of living includes more than gas. It includes car insurance, maintenance, the tires, parking depending on where you work and when you spend most of your time, the vehicle wear and tear, and commute time. Commute matters a lot here because Louisville is pretty spread out. Living in the East End and working downtown is one experience. Living in Southern Indiana and commuting into Louisville is another. Living in Oldham County and driving into the city is also an experience in its own. Living close to your work, school, gym, family, or church can change your daily life. And sometimes buyers choose a more affordable home farther out, but then realize they are paying for that decision with time, gas, and convenience. That does not mean it's wrong. It just means you should budget for it more honestly. One common question people ask is, what salary do I need to live comfortably in Louisville? And the honest answer is, it depends. I know the answer is not as satisfying as one clean number, but it's the truth here. A single person with no debt renting a 1-bedroom apartment could live comfortably on a very different income than a family trying to buy a larger home in a specific school district while also paying for childcare, 2 vehicles, student loans, and savings. So instead of giving you one number, I'd like to think about it in ranges. If you're a single person making around $50,000 to $60,000, you may be able to live in Louisville, but you'll need to be thoughtful about rent, car expenses, debt, and lifestyle. If you're making $60,000 to $75,000, you may have more flexibility, especially if you keep housing costs reasonable and don't have major debt obligations. If your household income is around $100,000, Louisville can often feel comfortable, but it still depends heavily on your housing choice, childcare, vehicles, debt, and how aggressively you want to save. And if your household income is above that, you may have more options in terms of neighborhoods, home size, and lifestyle. But even then, I still see people stretch too far if they only focus on what they qualify for instead of what they can actually afford and what they want their month to feel like. Here's a framework that I recommend. Start with the monthly payment you want to live with, not the maximum payment the bank will approve you for, the payment you can live with comfortably. Then work backwards. What home price does that support? What neighborhood does that fit in? What down payment do you need? What tax and insurance are realistic? What commute are you willing to accept? What lifestyle do you want to maintain? That is a much smarter way to approach affordability than starting with a random home price and hoping the payment works out for you. Now let's talk about hidden costs. There are things that may not show up in the first Zillow search, but they absolutely matter once you live here. The first hidden cost is maintenance, especially if you buy an older home. Louisville has many homes with character, but character comes with cost. Roofs, HVAC systems, windows, plumbing, electrical, drainage, basements, and foundation issues are all things you want to understand before buying here. The second hidden cost is updates. A home may be technically affordable, but if it needs flooring, paint, appliances, bathroom updates, kitchen work, landscaping, or major repairs, your real cost may be higher than you expected. The third hidden cost is commuting. A lower purchase price farther away may look good on paper, but if it adds a lot of driving, that has a cost, not just financially, but emotionally and practically. The fourth hidden cost is lifestyle. Louisville has more to do than sometimes people expect. Restaurants, coffee shops, bourbon events, concerts, festivals, sports, parks, kids' activities, weekend trips, these things can add up quick. It's not that Louisville is outrageously expensive, it's that people often move here thinking only about housing and forget that lifestyle spending is still a real concern. The fifth hidden cost is escrow changes. This one catches people off guard. Your mortgage rate may be fixed, but taxes and insurance can change over time, so your payment may not stay the exact same forever. And the sixth hidden cost is choosing the wrong area for the first time. This is a big one for relocation buyers. Buying in the wrong location can cost you more than almost anything else. If you move here, buy quickly, and then realize a year later that you would rather be in a totally different part of town, that can be expensive. That is why I encourage people to think beyond the house itself. Think about your actual day-to-day life. Where do you work? Where will your kids go to school? Where do you like to grocery shop? Where do you go out to eat? Where are your friends or family in the area? How often do you need to go to the airport if you travel a lot? Do you want walkability, space, quieter new construction, older charm, a shorter commute, or more land? Those answers affect your cost of living just as much as the purchase price. So should you rent or buy in Louisville in 2026? The answer depends on your timeline, your certainty, and your finances. Renting may make sense if you are brand new to the area, you do not know the neighborhoods, your job situation is still changing, or you want flexibility. Buying makes more sense if you have a longer term timeline, stable income, and a realistic budget, and a clear idea of where you want to live. What I would not recommend is buying just because you feel pressure, and also would not recommend renting forever just because buying feels intimidating. The right decision is the one that fits your actual situation. For some relocation buyers, the smartest move is to rent for 6 months, learn the city, then buy with more confidence. For others, the smarter move is to buy right away because they already know the area, the numbers work, and they are planning to be here long term. The important thing is to compare the real numbers, not just rent versus mortgage. Compare rent versus the full cost of ownership. That means principal, interest, taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance if applicable, HOA fees, utilities, repairs, maintenance, and your emergency fund. That is how you make a grounded decision. So can you actually afford to live in Louisville in 2026? For a lot of people, yes. Especially if you're coming from a higher cost city, Louisville may offer more breathing room, more space, and a more manageable housing market. But Louisville is not automatically affordable for every budget. The people who tend to feel best after moving here are the ones who understand the full monthly picture before they arrive. They're looking at their long-term plan, and that is really the difference between moving to Louisville and feeling settled versus moving here and feeling financially stretched. So my advice is simple: build your budget backward. Start with a monthly number you can comfortably live with, then figure out what areas, home types, and lifestyle choices fit that number, because the goal is not just to buy a home in Louisville, the goal is to build a life here that actually feels sustainable and makes you happy. If you're thinking about moving to Louisville or Southern Indiana and you want a realistic cost breakdown for your situation, reach out. You can send me your target budget, where you're moving from, whether you're planning to rent or buy, and what kind of lifestyle you're hoping to have here. I can help you compare neighborhoods, estimate realistic monthly payments, think through rent versus buy options, and understand what actually makes sense before you make the move. And if you want more videos like this about living in Louisville, moving to Louisville, the local housing market, and how to make a smart move here, make sure to subscribe. I'm creating videos all the time to help you understand the area before you get here so you can make a confident decision, not a rushed one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.